So in this, and so as Paul kind of moves through his this letter to the Romans, we have this somewhat perplexing discussion of the law and the commandment. And so the key sentence and the whole thing, which kind of decodes the whole thing, is when he says, now that we are slaves not under the old written code, but in the new life of the Spirit. And so what Paul's doing is contrasting a moral life that is shaped by a commandment that is exterior to us, and in a sense can only act on us as in a sense a coercive exterior agent, and the life of the Spirit in which our hearts are changed into, in a sense, our hearts are transformed into being able and willing to offer a loving obedience to God. And so what's at the background of the discussion about, well, if I had not known I would not have known what it is to covet if the law had not said, you shall not covet. Now, the Old Testament story in the background here is one of the main stories that Paul is working with in this whole letter, which is the story of Adam and Eve. This is Genesis chapter 3. And so law here doesn't necessarily mean the Torah, the specific injunctions of Torah. Law, in a sense, means commandment, means the will of God, uttered as an external coercive agent. In a sense, basically, God told them, you can eat everything here except from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so they eat, right? And they notice that it's desirable. And in a sense, it's almost like Eve didn't notice how desirable the fruit was until God said, "Don't eat that one." Ooh, which one did you say? Oh, that one. Okay. Oh, sure. And then God leaves, and they say, "Ooh, look, that's very pretty." And so, in a sense, they are drawn to it, and that sin is, in a sense, the human rebellion against God's will when it's presented to us as an external force. And so this new life of the Spirit is something in which our hearts are transformed so that we hear God's voice has an interior voice, a voice of love. And thus the nuptial imagery with which Paul starts the discussion about, the woman who's married to the one husband and then he dies and then she's now free to marry someone else. And since what Paul is saying is that the new life of the Spirit is a nuptial covenant. That is, God speaks to us as a lover. God speaks to us in love. And that we are called to respond in love by loving one another. And so our relationship to God, which is based on the law, that covenant, that marriage, is now gone because Jesus, in his perfect obedience, has brought that old commandment, that old law to an end, though the manner of God's relating to the human has an exterior commandment, coercive, and has now ushered in a new commandment, in a sense, a new marriage, in which we now are free to love God and obey him with all our hearts and all our minds, our souls, and all our strengths. And this is why Jesus starts out with, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, with all your mind, all your strength. And that's what the Spirit is called to allow, or to empower us to do. So, as Paul says, the commandment isn't bad any more than the deceased first husband is bad. It's not like he wasn't evil, he's just dead. And so now you're free to marry the one who loves you. And so Paul is saying the law is not evil in and of itself. It was given by God, but that its time has come to an end. And now we are free to enter into a new relationship of love with God. And so let us then pray for this gift of the Spirit. Pray for the gift of loving God's will for us so that we can eagerly seek to do God's will, not as something pressing upon us like some sort of doctor's orders, but rather as our own desire for flourishing and for a life of beauty and a life in which we can be a blessing to others. A reading from St. Paul's letter to the Romans. Do you not know, brothers and sisters, for I am speaking to those who know the law, that the law is binding on a person only during that person's lifetime? Thus, a married woman is bound by the law to her husband as long as he lives. But if her husband dies, she is discharged from the law concerning the husband. Accordingly, she will be called an adulteress if she lives with another man while her husband is alive. But if her husband dies, she is free from that law. And if she marries another man, she is not an adulteress. In the same way, my friends, you have died to the law through the body of Christ, so that you may belong to another, to him who has been raised from the dead, in order that we may bear fruit for God. While we were living in the flesh, our sinful passions, aroused by the law, were at work in our members to bear fruit for death. But now we are discharged from the law, dead to that which held us captive, so that we are slaves not under the old written code, but in the new life of the Spirit. What then should we say? That the law is sin? By no means. Yet, if it had not been for the law, I would not have known sin. I would not have known what it is to covet if the law had not said, "You shall not covet." But sin, seizing an opportunity in the commandment, produced in me all kinds of covetousness. Apart from the law, sin lies dead. I was once alive apart from the law, but when the commandment came, sin revived, and I died. And the very commandment that promised life proved to be death to me. For sin, seizing an opportunity in the commandment, deceived me, and through it killed me. So the law is holy, and the commandment is holy, and just, and good. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.